Funny guy of late night TV, Jimmy Kimmel drew attention this week to a not so funny topic, Donald Trump. In his opening monologue Tuesday, Kimmel appealed to Republicans, urging them to reject the former president. The comedian stepped out of his stand-up role and delivered a 19-minute monologue 1 week before the election. Let's watch.
Aren't you supposed to be running for president? Aren't you supposed to be worried about important topics? And here's the thing. It's kind of funny, these silly random rants of his, and they would be fine if he was hosting a podcast or selling knives at the farmer's market, but he's supposed to be leading us. People are listening to him, and the country is getting crazier because he makes it okay to be nuts.
Separate to all that, Kimmel also had some advice. Let's take a look at that.
It's in times like these, it's important to remember that cannabis is legal in our state. But you have to vote. If you can vote early, vote early. If you can't vote early, vote on time. If you want to vote for Trump, vote late, vote very late. Do your voting on Thursday or maybe Friday. This will be my third time voting against Donald Trump. Fifth, if you count the 2 times he was nominated for an Emmy for a reality show host.
So I think in the interest of fairness, we have 2 very contrasting clips there, because I would assume you're going to have a problem with the just don't vote or vote late or whatever instruction. The first one was the thing that interested me, because I thought it was intriguing how Kimmel couched his argument in the idea that Trump isn't really a serious person. He was arguing against the idea, or he wasn't relying on the argument of, that we always hear Democrats make about authoritarianism, danger to democracy, so much as he was saying, look, this is a massive country, the world's only superpower, it has all sorts of problems, and this person just isn't a serious person when you look at, for example, the lack of a healthcare plan. Why is he wrong?
Well, it's a little ironic coming from a late-night comedian of all people.
Well,
that doesn't mean
we'll get into that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that he's not allowed to talk about politics. Obviously,
Right.
they all do, and it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. But I would just say that this has already been attempted during the 2016 Republican primary. The large argument against Trump was that he was not serious. He was a joke candidate. Why is anybody taking him seriously? Nobody really believes that he's in this for the American people, and his ideas are buffoonish because they were different from what the Republican establishment was used to. One by one, he knocked out all of his Republican opponents. It was not until the general that the Democrats really switched their messaging to, no, actually, this guy's really dangerous, he's a fascist. And maybe it's part of their problem with messaging that they haven't stuck to one of those 2. Is he so unserious and a buffoon and a loser? Or is he so deadly serious that he's going to end democracy, refuse to leave office, and terminate the Constitution? Those 2 things I don't think can coexist at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point about the Democratic messaging, and it is a tricky thing that they're trying to claim that he is this danger to democracy and a buffoon at the same time. And we talked about that a little bit at other points in today's show. I'm just honestly curious. I mean, you're much more plugged into the conservative world than I am. People who are principled, intellectual conservatives, don't they have, when Trump, for example, still doesn't really have any kind of healthcare plan if he replaces and repeals Obamacare, what he replaces it with just isn't clear. There have to be people in that Washington Republican world who have pretty big concerns about that, sure.
Yeah, I actually wrote about this during his first administration about Republicans who were working on a health proposal for after the 2020 election. And it was your typical think tanks like Heritage and AEI and maybe even Cato thrown in a little bit, who were trying to all work together to present him with a white paper. Here's the healthcare plan that's going to replace Obamacare. And now I think the Trump campaign has largely abandoned even the idea of getting rid of Obamacare because it's so entrenched, as Speaker Mike Johnson put it in recent comments, where he was accused of saying that they were going to not have Obamacare anymore. If you watch the clip, it sounds like he was actually repeating a question from an audience member where he asked no Obamacare. And it's one of those things where once the policy is in, even if it's bad, it's hard to get rid of it because the voters tend to revolt. But to answer your question, I'm sure there are a lot of movement conservatives who don't like Trump for a variety of reasons, and a lot of them having to do with policy, not even just the lack of a specific plan on health care, but because he cut against a lot of the traditional conservative lines. And I don't even use the word traditional to mean historical, because it really is only for the past 40 years that you see conservatism take on this sort of neoconservative foreign policy combined with libertarian economics as being the standard bearer for the party. I mean, before that, when you had even Barry Goldwater, Pat Buchanan in the 90s, they were much more populist on a lot of the issues than people remember the Republican Party being. So I think Trump is actually tapping into something that's even older than this sort of neocon think tank world.
Yeah, we'll circle back to the other Kimmel comment about elections in a second, but I guess, you know, to try to take this out of a sort of partisan lens, sometimes I think when it comes to Trump, Democrats don't, like, so my basic view of Trump and his appeal is, he is in fact very good at identifying problems or grievances that people have that often are legitimate. Some of them, I think, are far too inflammatory and you know, playing footsie with very toxic currents in American society. But when, for example, he talks about working class people, particularly in the heartland states, being screwed over, that seems objectively correct that that happened to me. I think the as it were, non-partisan critique of Trump is he identifies the problem but always comes, or only comes up, with the most sort of facile and sloganeering solutions that don't actually grapple with a lot of those issues in any serious way at all.
I mean, maybe, but I guess the pushback would be, is he going to have people around him in the administration that actually are policy experts who know how to craft these sloganeering ideas into something that is compelling and competent and efficient and effective? In the first term, one of my biggest critiques of the Trump administration was that he had people around him who either were actively working against the things that he campaigned for, or they were people who didn't have much experience and didn't know how to implement them.
And sorry, I'm not trying to be like be a smart ass about it, but you think he will have people to do those things this time?
I hope so. And we asked the Trump spokeswoman, Caroline Leavitt, about what his plan was to make sure that he surrounded himself with the right people, because he now acknowledges that he did not have the right people. And it was one of the things watching from the sidelines during the first administration, as I'm talking to people around the conservative movement, it's like, why on earth would he hire that person? Or how did this person get to this high level position? And a lot of it was a sort of falling back on loyalty or flattery and things like that. And I hope that he's able to combine the loyalty with competence in the second term.
And we shall see about that. Meanwhile, briefly, the Jimmy Kimmel, the second comment that you drew my attention to, what are your thoughts?
Well, here's my problem. It's obviously meant to be a joke. He's telling people to tell Trump supporters to vote late or vote on the wrong day or whatever. And what caught my eye about this was because there's a big story in conservative media in 2016 about an online influencer by the name of Douglas Mackey. He tweeted under the account Ricky Vaughn. He had like 60,000 followers at the time, and he posted a joke meme about how Hillary voters can text a certain phone number, text vote to this number, and your vote will be counted. And the DOJ actually went after him. They seized his bank records, his phone communications. He ended up getting convicted, or he might have pleaded guilty, I can't recall, to election interference and served 7 months in prison. So I would urge Jimmy Kimmel to be very careful, except the Department of Justice, I doubt, is going to go after this late-night comedian. They're more interested in going after Douglas Mackey, and I think that's a shame. Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I think that's... I thought the monologue, which did not include those comments that you were referring to, was actually much better because it wasn't really sneering at conservatives, which I think late-night hosts are prone to do, or on the other side. I mean, the only one I can think of on the conservative side is Greg Gutfeld on Fox, who I think sneers at liberals, and I don't love sneering humour generally, but what Kimmel said about the elections, yes, it's clear it was in jest. I didn't love it either at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. We don't really seem to have consistent standards being
from...
applied
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
that's the problem with it for me. All right, that's going to do it for us today on Rising. As always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.